In today's world, almost every message you send, video you stream, and connection you make online travels through something so fragile you could snap it between your fingers. A strand of glass thinner than a human hair. We live in an age powered not by copper or steel, but by light itself. And yet, the story of fiber optics didn't begin with the internet. It began much earlier, with a simple experiment that most people would never even have heard of. Today I'll be diving, or tech diving, into the history of optical fiber cables, or fiber optics for short. But first, for the people who don't know what one is, a fiber optic is a tiny, flexible strand of glass or plastic that carries information as pulses of light. Instead of sending electrical signals through copper wires, fiber optics use light, which means data can travel much faster over much longer distances and without losing quality, effectively at light speed. So then, how were they invented? It all began in 1854, when a physicist named John Tyndall stood in a darkened lecture hall. Holding a container of water, he poured it out slowly, creating a smooth stream. Then, with a flick of his hand, he shone a beam of light into it. The audience gasped. Instead of escaping, the light followed the curve of the water, bending as if it were trapped inside of it. In that moment, a hidden property of nature was revealed. Light could be guided, and once humanity knew that, the question was obvious. If light could be guided, could it be used to carry information? Well, like the telegraph had taught us beforehand, using light to communicate made sense to a lot of people. And even still today, it's a process very similar to Morse code. So for decades, inventors tried. Early versions of what they called light pipes were pretty clumsy to say the least. They were mostly thick rods of glass, mirrors, even bundles of bent tubes. Also around this time, some doctors thought of sending light deep into the body, creating a way to see places eyes could never reach. And those early experiments would one day lead to medical endoscopes. But the problem was very clear. The light always leaked out. Impurities in the glass scattered the beam, dimming it into nothing long before it could be used for communication. For almost a century, the idea was stuck. The dream of guiding light seemed to be a dead end, but people kept trying, and the idea never faded away. It was always there in the back of people's minds. And then one day, the world began to change. By the middle of the 20th century, copper wires, the workhorses of telegraphs and telephones, were being pushed to their absolute limits. More people meant more phone calls, more data, and more demand. The world needed something faster, cleaner, and more powerful, because they wouldn't do the trick forever. And then came the laser. Invented in 1960, the laser was a breakthrough that turned light into something entirely new, a steady, coherent beam that could be pointed like a bullet. For the first time, the idea of sending information with light seemed possible, but there was still one slightly small problem. How would you stop a laser beam from scattering and fading away? This needed to be traveling across miles, not millimeters. Well, that's when a young engineer named Charles Cow asked a daring question. Cow suggested that the real problem wasn't the technology of light sources, it was the glass itself. In 1966, he argued that if glass could be purified to an extraordinary degree, it would lose almost no light at all. Instead of fading out within a few meters, it might be able to carry a signal for kilometers. At the time, people laughed. The best glass available still lost light thousands of times too quickly to be useful. And so the idea seemed absurd, but Cow was actually right. 4 years later, researchers at Corning Glass Works managed to create an ultra-pure strand of glass with almost no impurities. Suddenly, the impossible became real. Light could be guided across real distances. Cow would later win the Nobel Prize for his insight, and after that, Narinder Singh Kapani, who was an Indian-American physicist and a pioneer in the field of fiber optics, created the first functional fiber optic cable, and he's also known for coining and popularizing the term fiber optics over optical fiber cables. They're both now remembered as the founding fathers of fiber optics. The 1970s quickly became a proving ground. In 1977, the first experimental fiber optic phone system was tested in Chicago, transmitting calls over glass instead of copper. It worked. By the 1980s, entire cities were starting to be wired with fiber networks. Engineers quickly realized that fiber wasn't just better, it was orders of magnitude better. Where copper carried signals in megabits, fiber could carry them in gigabits, with far less noise and interference. And then, in 1988, came a milestone that changed the world. An undersea cable known as TAT-8 was laid across the Atlantic Ocean, connecting the United States, Britain, and France. I'd recommend checking out my video about those, but to sum it up here, it was the first undersea fiber optic cable, and it could carry 40,000 phone calls at once, a number almost unimaginable at the time. This single project marked the beginning of a new global nervous system, one made not out of copper or radio waves, but of glass threads resting on the ocean floor. From there, the world only accelerated. Through the 1990s, as the internet began to emerge, more and more fiber was laid across countries, continents, and even oceans. By the early 2000s, fiber optics had become a backbone of global communication, but engineers weren't finished. They discovered a technique called wavelength division multiplexing. Yeah, I can pronounce words. Instead of sending just one beam down a fiber, you could send dozens, each one with a slightly different color. With the right equipment, these colors wouldn't interfere with one another, and suddenly each strand of fiber could carry hundreds of channels of information at once. And as the technology advanced, the capacity of a single cable skyrocketed. Today, a single modern fiber optic cable can transmit terabits of data per second. That's millions of high-definition video streams all flowing silently through a strand of glass lying deep under the sea. Right now, as you watch this video, your data may have crossed an ocean through one of these very cables. In fact, like I mentioned in my undersea cable video a while back, over 95% of international internet traffic travels this way, not by satellite, not by magic clouds, but through physical fibers stretched across the earth. If those cables were ever cut, large portions of the internet would simply vanish. It's strange to think about because most of us will never see them. They're buried underground, tucked inside utility poles, or resting at the bottom of the sea. They're invisible, and yet they carry the heartbeat of the modern world. Fiber optics didn't just replace copper, they transformed communication as a whole into something fundamentally new, and that's why they'll always be remembered and used. What do you guys think about fiber optics? Let me know in the comments. Hey guys, Tech Diver here, and thank you so much for watching this video. If you haven't seen the channel before, I upload every Thursday, and as always, let me know if there's any other videos you guys want me to make. That being said, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.